You're here not by chance, but because something within you guided you to this video at this specific time. By the end, you'll start to see why genuine healing isn't always a sudden epiphany. More often, it's a quiet nudge amid the noise, a gentle suggestion arising not from external changes but from an internal shift, a reassembling of yourself. Healing begins when you embrace the parts of your past you've tried to disown. It starts as you integrate all that you've experienced, everything you've suppressed or ignored. As Carl Jung pointed out, transformation isn't about illuminating the shadow, but about becoming aware of the darkness. It's in this often subtle process that the soul's true integration unfolds. Even if you don't fully realize it, there are subtle yet significant signs indicating that you're already healing from deep within. One of the primary indicators is a cessation of inner conflict. Not because you're forcing peace or pretending everything is fine, but because a gentle understanding starts to take root. It's a silent acknowledgement that allows you to observe yourself without judgment, to feel without demanding constant improvement, to simply exist within yourself without the need for constant correction. Your internal monologue starts to evolve. You cease punishing yourself for having feelings. You no longer pressure yourself to be perfect in order to earn rest. Instead, you begin addressing yourself with both honesty and kindness. This compassion isn't weakness. It's a gentle strength that begins to dismantle the internal barriers that once separated you from your authentic self. This gentleness doesn't appear overnight. It gradually settles in with each decision you make in your own favor. With every instance you choose not to berate yourself for lacking answers, for not healing quickly enough, or for not reacting as expected, you begin to realize that true strength isn't about being invulnerable. It's about feeling everything and still moving forward, even when your wounds are still raw. The internal battle that once seemed unending starts to subside, not because everything is resolved, but because you're no longer at war with who you are. You begin to accept that you can experience anger without losing yourself, that you can feel fear and still progress, that you can stumble without becoming a failure. This acceptance isn't resignation, it's clarity. It's the profound realization that every emotion, every wound, every rejected aspect of yourself is a vital component of your soul's journey. When you allow all of these elements to coexist, when you grant every part of yourself the space to simply be, something sacred occurs. A silent unification begins between who you were, who you are, and who you are becoming. The demands you once placed on yourself start to loosen their grip. Internal judgment diminishes, and in its place arises a more grounded, real, and human presence. You're no longer striving to become someone new. You're starting to truly inhabit yourself, which in itself is a potent form of healing. This is a healing that doesn't require obvious rituals or dramatic revelations to be authentic. It manifests in your daily life, in those moments when you might have once given up, but now you choose to stay, not to immediately fix everything, but simply to stand by yourself with dignity and patience. You begin to notice that pain no longer wields the same power over you. It still arises, of course, but it arrives with a different rhythm, a different intensity, a different quality. It no longer overwhelms you, it informs you. It no longer halts your progress. It accompanies you as you move forward. This occurs because you've stopped rejecting pain. You've come to understand that pain isn't your enemy. It's a part of your story that was waiting to be acknowledged. Your body also senses this shift. The chronic tensions you used to carry without even questioning them begin to release gradually but noticeably. Your breathing deepens naturally. Your sleep becomes more restorative. Not because your life has become effortless, but because you're finally carrying your burdens from a more integrated place, a place where you no longer have to abandon yourself simply to survive. Emotions that once embarrassed you no longer feel like threats. They become legitimate expressions of who you are, expressions you can now recognize without the need to correct them. You can be sad without believing you're broken. You can feel insecure without questioning your worth. You can have a bad day without thinking you've regressed. This is a clear sign that you're healing through integration, the ability to hold both your light and your shadow without rejecting either. You're no longer fragmenting yourself to be liked, nor are you suppressing your truth to fit in. Now you embrace all that you are, with your contradictions, your vulnerabilities, your quiet inner victories. This wholeness, even with its imperfections, is far more authentic than any mask of perfection you once attempted to wear. Another indicator is a shift in your perception of the past. It's not about forgetting what happened or masking your pain with superficial positivity. It's about being able to look at your story and feel that it no longer wounds you in the same way. It doesn't weigh you down as it once did. You no longer fall apart every time a memory resurfaces. When you heal through integration, your difficult experiences cease to feel like constant threats. They become recognized aspects of your journey, elements of your past that have been acknowledged. They no longer define your present. They've been woven into the narrative of your evolution, not erased, not glorified, simply accepted as part of the sacred whole that is you. You begin to remember, not to reopen old wounds or dwell in pain, but with a newfound strength that no longer allows those memories to control you. It's not that what you've endured has ceased to matter. The impact is still present. The experiences have shaped you, but you're no longer defined by them. You're no longer imprisoned by the version of yourself that was broken, betrayed, or afraid. You're no longer just the defense mechanism that once erected walls for survival. Now you are the one who has walked alongside every version of yourself, the wounded, the protective, the silent, the loud, and has chosen, with wisdom and love, to bring all of them together. You've made peace with your contradictions. You've chosen integration over fragmentation. You are someone who has seen the depths and, instead of turning away, has chosen to honor it all and move forward with deeper awareness. Your past is no longer a punishment. It becomes something sacred, a place where you learn to support yourself when everything else failed. It becomes a sacred ground that holds not only pain, but the roots of your strength. The things you once avoided looking at, the decisions you didn't want to discuss, the moments you tried to forget, you now meet with respect. You no longer feel the need to conceal them or to feel ashamed of who you were when you didn't possess the knowledge you have now. You begin to understand that all of your past selves, the quiet ones, the angry ones, the scared ones, the ones who fell repeatedly, were never mistakes. They were expressions of your will to survive. They were attempts to protect your heart in a world you hadn't yet learned to navigate. And now, from your present vantage point, you can finally embrace all of them, not with guilt or regret, but with the tenderness that you didn't know how to offer yourself back then. That tenderness doesn't weaken you, it liberates you. Because only those who have made peace with their past can step into their future with a soul that feels light, unburdened, and whole. You no longer carry your story like chains around your ankles. You carry it like threads woven into the fabric of your being, not denying what happened, but acknowledging that through it, your soul learned exactly what it needed to remember. That understanding transforms everything. It shifts how you tell your story. You no longer speak from the wound as if it's still bleeding. You speak from the scar, soft, healed, full of memory, but no longer raw. Your story ceases to be a tragedy and becomes a journey. You no longer define yourself by what was done to you or by what you lost. You define yourself by how you chose to rise, to transform, to grow beyond the limits that pain once imposed on you. That transformation isn't loud, it's not something you shout. It's not something that needs to be explained, but it is unmistakable. People sense it in your presence. They notice the difference even if they can't articulate it. You radiate something calmer, something rooted, not because you're pretending to be healed, but because you truly have begun to understand the alchemy of your own becoming. You no longer speak from open wounds, but from scars that carry wisdom. You also realize that forgiveness isn't always about others, sometimes it's about you. Forgiving yourself for the times you didn't protect your own heart, for the moments you stayed silent when your soul was screaming, for the instances when you abandoned what you felt just to hold on to something or someone you were afraid to lose. And now, instead of punishing yourself, you offer yourself compassion. You understand that you did the best you could with the level of awareness you had at that time. That self-forgiveness dissolves judgment. It makes space for a new kind of gratitude. Not the kind that glorifies the past or pretends it was all beautiful, but the kind that honors what it taught you. You begin to see that in the darkest places, something began to bloom. A seed of awakening was planted. That gratitude changes your energy. It doesn't make you naive, it makes you profound. You no longer carry your past as a burden. You carry it as your root system, anchoring you, grounding you, reminding you of where you come from, but never preventing you from growing. Your story is no longer a prison. It becomes your expansion. It doesn't isolate you. It connects you to others in more real and honest ways. You're not trying to be seen anymore. You're not seeking validation. You are simply sharing your truth. And that authenticity creates bridges where once there were walls. From that place, your past no longer stands between you and the world. You no longer need to conceal your experiences to feel safe. You've stopped identifying solely with the pain. Now, when you speak from transformation, not from trauma. That shift doesn't make you cold or distant. It makes you accessible, relatable, magnetic. Because people can sense when someone has walked through darkness and chosen not to reside there. Your presence deepens. It becomes quieter but more powerful. Not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you've become someone who holds their story with reverence rather than resistance. You no longer emanate confusion or denial. You emanate wholeness. Wholeness doesn't shout. It simply exists, firm, radiant, grounded. You also notice that when you revisit your past, it's not to seek blame or to justify your pain. If you return, it's with purpose, to gather wisdom, to close cycles, to understand patterns, to consciously close doors that were left slightly open, not as punishment, but as liberation. Nostalgia, when it arises, doesn't overwhelm you. You don't drown in it. You sit with it, you honor it, but you don't cling to it. Because what once felt like a desperate need now feels like a part of you that has been seen, loved, and gently placed back in its rightful place. And when that happens, something inside you feels lighter. You realize you don't need to reject your past to move forward. Integration is not forgetting. It's the most loving way to evolve. You no longer push away what hurt you. You welcome it as part of your human experience, understanding that everything your soul endured was necessary to arrive here. With this clarity, with this peace, with this deeper level of consciousness. Another unmistakable sign that you're healing and evolving through deep inner integration is when you begin to act from your center rather than from reactive impulses. It's a quiet but powerful shift, one that often goes unnoticed by the outside world but changes everything within you. This transformation is not about becoming cold or indifferent. It's about finding a grounded space inside yourself from which your actions naturally arise. When you've reconnected the fragmented parts of your inner world, you no longer feel the need to defend yourself against every challenge, explain every emotion, or prove your worth through impulsive reactions. Your energy stabilizes. Your words become more thoughtful, more deliberate. Your actions start to flow from a unified core, a place within that no longer breaks apart under pressure. You no longer react to life, you respond. And that response comes from clarity, not fear, from presence, not urgency. This is what it means to live integrated. What once overwhelmed you emotionally now meets a new version of you, a version that can observe without becoming consumed, that can feel without getting lost in the feeling. It's not that you stop feeling. It's that you learn to hold space for your emotions. You no longer need to build walls around your heart or lash out in self-protection. You stop confusing hardness with strength. Your power is no longer something you need to assert. It simply exists, quiet, calm, and steady. You maintain your center, not by dominating the situation, but by staying rooted in yourself. This center, this inner stability, is not something you fake or pretend. It's not learned from a book or copied from someone else. It's the organic result of facing your inner shadows, of listening to the parts of you that used to sabotage your growth, and, more than anything, of accepting them. When you make peace with your inner contradictions, your external behavior shifts. You begin to act from serenity, not from fear, from awareness, not from the need to control. This change in frequency doesn't just affect you, it alters your entire reality. You no longer need to be right. Peace becomes more important than winning an argument. You no longer dive into conflict just to protect your ego, because you finally understand there's nothing in you that needs to be defended. When you feel whole and when all your internal parts have been acknowledged and embraced, external conflicts lose their power over you. You become quieter, but your presence speaks louder than ever. That presence doesn't push or impose, it doesn't collapse under pressure. It holds space, it accompanies, it transforms. And it does all this from a place of profound coherence. This kind of coherence isn't theoretical or performative. It doesn't come from pretending to have everything figured out. It emerges when you stop living in pieces, when you stop splitting yourself between what you feel and what you show, between what you think and what you do. Your way of being in the world transforms, not because life becomes perfect, but because you no longer filter it through the lens of past pain. You begin to exist fully, even in discomfort, without being pulled into chaos. Your energy no longer trembles at every provocation, because you've stopped projecting your unhealed wounds onto the world around you. You don't hand others the power to unbalance you. Your center becomes your sanctuary, not a battlefield. That doesn't mean you've stopped feeling. It means you now have the ability to choose how to move with what you feel. You can cry and still be at peace. You can feel afraid and still take the next step. Your emotions are no longer warnings that something is wrong. They're companions that guide you through life. You begin to understand that you don't have to react to everything, not because you don't care, but because you now recognize the value of your energy. You become unwilling to waste it on conflicts that go nowhere, on hollow conversations, or on relationships that only exist in reactive dynamics. Integration naturally makes you more selective, but not from judgment, rather from self-respect. When you learn to inhabit your own inner space, you also learn how to protect it without closing it off. You set boundaries without guilt. You speak your truth without losing your composure. This changes your presence entirely. You become someone who can hold space for others without taking on their weight, who can listen deeply without absorbing others' pain, who can express their energy without trying to dominate anyone. That kind of presence cannot be faked. It only arises when you've made peace with every part of yourself, when there's no longer a war between your mind and your heart, between your body and your soul. You no longer need to hide your healing process. You allow yourself to honor your pace, to embrace your silences, to give space to your pauses. You stop defining yourself by your productivity or by how strong you appear on the outside. Instead, you define yourself by your integrity, by your capacity to hold yourself with compassion without demanding perfection. You stay true to yourself, even when no one's watching. As you continue along this path, you begin to feel a new kind of order emerging within you. Your emotions no longer compete with each other. Your decisions become firmer. The mental noise that used to dominate your thoughts begins to settle, not because it disappears entirely, but because now you can distinguish your true voice from the voices of fear and disconnection. Even your mistakes begin to take on a new meaning. You stop punishing yourself for every misstep. You stop demanding that you start over every time you stumble. Because now you see that each step, even the uncertain ones, are part of your journey. Each one is a thread in the fabric of your integration. You begin to understand yourself more clearly, and in that understanding, you stop breaking apart every time life pushes you into unfamiliar territory. From this deep self-awareness, your strength becomes grounded. You don't need to shout it or prove it. It's there, it's within you. You wear it like a second skin. In a world that often worships appearances, this kind of authenticity becomes a sacred form of resistance. When you act from that center, you no longer lose yourself so easily. You recognize yourself even in the chaos. You know how to return to yourself without having to rebuild from scratch, because no part of you has been left behind. Every part has been called home, and in that homecoming, your soul finally finds the stability it has been seeking all along. Another powerful sign of inner transformation is when the way you connect with others begins to reflect the harmony you've cultivated within yourself. You no longer seek relationships from a place of lack, but from a place of awareness. What you once chased externally, validation, love, wholeness, you now recognize as something that already exists within you. From that quiet sense of fullness, you choose more clearly. You no longer form bonds to fill emotional voids, but to share the richness you've cultivated inside. You stop attracting relationships that mirror the same old wounds under different disguises. Why? Because you no longer need someone else to play the part of the version of you that you were unwilling to face. Now you can recognize your projections without shame. You don't reject them, you integrate them. You look at them with honesty, not self-blame. In that radical honesty, you find freedom. You're no longer satisfied with half-hearted connections, not out of arrogance, but because your soul can no longer tolerate anything that stems from a mask or pretense. You crave depth, you seek presence, you yearn for real connections that breathe authenticity even if they sometimes hurt, even if they're not always comfortable. Because you've come to understand that discomfort, when born from true encounters, can also be sacred. The way you communicate begins to shift. You speak with less noise and more intention. You don't feel the need to say everything, but whatever you do express carries the weight of your integrated self, your centered presence, your unembellished truth. That truth doesn't wound others because it doesn't come from a place of defensiveness. It simply exists. You allow yourself to set boundaries without causing harm. You give yourself permission to walk away without resentment because you no longer cling to people who fragment you, nor do you remain in places where you must forget yourself to stay. Your internal integration starts to reflect in your external life. In that mirror, everything that isn't mutual, balanced, or true begins to dissolve naturally. There's no need to force anything anymore. Your energy no longer supports it. This transformation becomes visible in subtle ways in how you listen without trying to save, in how you accompany others without absorbing their pain as if it were yours to carry. You begin to choose to stay only where truth is present. When it's not, you walk away lovingly, guilt-free. You're no longer in relationships to fix your past. Now you connect to grow, to evolve together, not to cover up old wounds with fleeting affection. This shift changes everything about the quality of your relationships because your soul no longer accepts emotional breadcrumbs, nor does it feed off shallow connections with no roots. You start to feel peaceful within yourself. Even in solitude, what once felt like emptiness now becomes a fertile space. You're no longer running away from anything. You're fully inhabiting yourself. From that place, any relationship that enters your life must resonate with that same frequency of authenticity. You're no longer manipulated by the fear of losing someone because you've learned that you cannot lose what is truly meant for you. When someone leaves as you stand firmly in your truth, they're not really leaving. They're revealing themselves. Your soul no longer makes silent contracts just to be loved. You no longer edit yourself to be liked. You don't lower the volume of your inner voice to avoid making others uncomfortable. In that strength born of deep integration, your relationships become more honest, healthier, and far more real. Because when you no longer abandon yourself, you also no longer allow others to abandon you. That sacred dignity that now lives within you elevates every bond you keep. It's no longer about holding on. It's about sharing. It's no longer about needing. It's about resonating. When your relationships begin to emerge from resonance rather than need, they become mirrors of your healing. You're no longer tangled in stories that only fed your emptiness. You now connect with people who are just as committed to their own truth as you are. There's no drama, only presence. There's no power play, only mutual respect. There's no pressure to be someone you're not, only space to be fully who you are. You discover that love, when lived from integration, doesn't seek control or external security. It seeks shared freedom. Love stops hurting, not because challenges disappear, but because you no longer place your worth in someone else's hands. You no longer wait for someone to complete you. You don't need to be rescued. You simply offer what is already full within you. Even in goodbyes, the energy is different. You no longer beg for permanence in places where growth has ceased. You no longer force yourself to stay in relationships that repeat outdated dynamics disguised as love. You walk away without bitterness. You stay without fear, Because you understand that your inner peace is more valuable than any forced connection. You've realized that every relationship is a reflection of the one you have with yourself. From this place of integration, even the way you support others transforms. You no longer give advice out of a frantic need to fix things. You now know how to hold space without interfering. You respect that everyone has their own rhythm, their own timing, and their own journey of awakening. You understand that no one can do the inner work for another, that healing only arises from one's own will. You become more empathetic, but also more grounded, more loving, yet more honest. This energy, when balanced, becomes one of the clearest signs that you are healing, not just superficially but deeply from the soul, from the total integration of all the parts of you that once felt fragmented. Then something extraordinary begins to unfold, so subtly, so gently, that you almost don't notice it at first. It's not a sudden burst of joy, not the kind of high that comes from external achievement or the thrill of new beginnings. It's quieter, than that more profound. You start to feel peace without any apparent reason, a peace that doesn't rely on your surroundings being perfect or on every area of your life being resolved. It arises spontaneously, like a breath that slows on its own, like an inner silence that doesn't disturb you, but wraps around you like a warm, invisible blanket. You're not euphoric. You're not seeking stimulation or novelty. You're simply here, fully present. That state of presence, which once felt unreachable, like something only monks or sages might attain, now starts to feel natural, like something that was always inside you, waiting for you to notice. This peace doesn't mean you've stopped feeling pain. You still feel deeply, but now you know how to hold it. You no longer run from your emotions, deny them, or bury them deep inside. You don't identify with them either. You witness them. You stay with them gently, like a compassionate observer. When they've served their purpose, you let them go naturally, lovingly. This shift brings another clarity. You begin to see the difference between what is urgent and what is truly important. You stop reacting to everything. You don't feel the pressure to prove you're making progress, because you already are. Your soul stops running. When the soul stops running, something miraculous happens. The body begins to rest, the mind quiets. Your energy becomes lighter, more fluid. Even as you continue to move through life's ups and downs, you no longer fight every discomfort. You stop resisting reality. Instead, you choose to be fully present with what is, without spiraling into judgment or fear. Then the world starts to notice. Not because you've made an announcement, not because you've tried to convince anyone, but because your presence has changed. The way you speak, the way you look at people, the way you move, it all carries a different frequency now. You no longer feel the need to explain your healing. You no longer seek validation. What you transmit is felt deeply. What is felt from a place of peace doesn't require proof. It simply is. In that silent recognition, you realize something even more powerful. Peace isn't the end of the path. It's the new way you walk it. You stop needing the world to align perfectly for you to feel okay. Your balance comes from within. Now it is no longer fragile, because it isn't built on outside conditions. It doesn't vanish with change because it's not just an emotion. It's a state of the soul that has stopped fragmenting itself. You're no longer chasing fulfillment as if it's some distant goal. You begin to realize that the wholeness you've been seeking was never outside of you. It was always within you, buried under layers of self-criticism, guilt, and abandonment. Now that you've begun the sacred work of integration, that fullness begins to rise effortlessly, like a river that's finally allowed to flow after being dammed for so long. You begin to understand that calm does not come from control. True serenity isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting yourself. Trusting yourself no longer means being certain of everything. It means being at home in your own skin, even amidst the unknown. It means you can change direction without feeling lost. You can pause without feeling like a failure. You can lack answers and still feel whole. From this place of peace, the noise of the world begins to lose its grip. External opinions no longer define your worth. The pressure that once suffocated you now feels distant, Not because you've shut the world out, but because you no longer shapeshift to fit in. You no longer need to earn your place, you belong to yourself now. That inner belonging becomes the foundation upon which everything else is built. Every action you take comes from a clearer intention. Every moment of silence becomes sacred, space no longer empty but rich with meaning. Every connection becomes a choice, not a desperate need. This calm, this unshakable peace that supports you without explanation or performance, is the most profound signal that healing is happening deeply, authentically, not through resistance, but through integration. If something inside you felt aligned while hearing these words, if a part of you recognized this truth, it's because you're already in the midst of this sacred process. Healing through integration doesn't mean forgetting who you were. It means embracing all of it fully and consciously. It means letting every version of yourself, even the wounded ones, come back into wholeness. You are not broken. You are gathering your scattered pieces. In this sacred inner gathering, the peace you once searched for out there begins to awaken within you. Silent, deep, real. If this message resonated with your soul, if you felt that it was meant for you at this exact moment in time, your awakening deserves to be witnessed. Your journey deserves to be honored. And your presence, just as it is the very gift this world needs. So, if these words have stirred something within you, if even for a moment you felt seen, understood, or simply more at peace, don't let that feeling fade. This journey is just beginning, and you don't have to walk it alone. There is a whole community of souls just like you, waking up, healing, and remembering who they truly are. Let this space be your reminder that you are not alone, that your process matters, and that your healing is sacred. If this message touched your heart, share it with someone who might need it today. You never know how deeply a few words can change a life. Together we grow, together we rise, and together we return home to ourselves. Thank you for being here. Your presence is powerful, and the world is better because you're in it.